Da Dang. Chapter 43. Tu Yao was standing under the wall when his subordinate went about tiptoeing next to him to set up a ladder. Still finding the information hard to believe, he grabbed his subordinates by the arm and demanded, "Last time, did you really hear?" "I swear," replied the subordinate next to his ear, Liao Jixiang and Xie Yulu. Tu Yao pushed him aside, rolled up the hem of his robe and climbed up the ladder. The courtyard was not truly spacious, yet it was enclosed within high walls, not to mention the darkness at this hour, so it took him a considerable amount of time to find his way down. As an expert at sneaking about, Tu Yao soon decided on a hiding spot after a brief examination of the surroundings. The weather had turned cold in the past few days, yet a gap remained open on the window facing east. He leaned over, aligning his body close to the gap, and strained his eyes to peer into it. The house was still dark. No one had arrived yet. Without making a noise, Tu Yao hid himself in the darkness like a lifeless shadow, but his heart was tumultuous. That brave, fierce Liao Jixiang, that cold, lofty Liao Jixiang, would he really permit Xie Yulu to do that? At the sound of the first drum, Liao Jixiang arrived. A faint yellow glow leaked from the gap and spilled into the courtyard. Tu Yao squinted to peek in. Liao Jixiang was wearing a blue kesi robe, standing still, all alone in the middle of the room. /Note 1. In ancient time, drums were used to signal time, first at midnight, then at dawn and at dusk. 2. Kesi is a technique in Chinese silk tapestry renowned for its lightness and clarity of pattern. He began to remove his garments, his face rather looked exhausted. While in the middle of it, his movements froze all of a sudden. He then lifted his head and stared at the ceiling in an odd manner. Only after a long while did Tu Yao realize that he was attempting to hold back his tears. It's because of Jin Tang's death. Tu Yao's chest constricted sharply, it was even a little painful. It had never occurred to him that a eunuch as powerful as Liao Jixiang would shed tears for a dispensable, insignificant subordinate. After standing straight and still for a while, Liao Jixiang gave his eyes a wipe or two with his sleeves and tugged his hair loose. Dark, lustrous hair cascaded down. Zheng Xian had them too, but his was entirely different. This one was longer, shiner and imbued with a graceful charm. Wearing his white undergarment, Liao Jixiang walked towards the wall while untying his pants. Tu Yao fixed his eyes on him, who bent down after taking off his pants, and soon came the sound of dripping water. He was urinating. Tu Yao was shocked. Liao Jixiang was actually squatting down to relieve himself like a woman. For reasons unknown to him, that hidden tender spot in his chest started to hurt even more. When Liao Jixiang got up again, he didn't pick up his pants. Instead, he casually took them off and tossed them aside. The shiny white silk tunic barely covered his buttocks, half revealing a secret erotic view, as well as his two slender legs which were as fair as snow, an extremely gorgeous sight. Tu Yao drew in a light, shallow breath as he watched Liao Jixiang limp to the basin stand. He wet his handkerchief in the basin, and then, after taking off his tunic as well, he began to slowly wipe his chest with his back facing Tu Yao. Tu Yao had witnessed similar scenes countless times, young maidens and young wives, he had seen them all, yet what he had seen was nothing like this. The figure in front of his eyes was utterly pure, yet irresistibly seductive. And while it was indeed seductive, it was in fact even more lofty and distant. In the meantime, Liao Jixiang knew nothing of the eyes hiding behind the east window. Thinking about Xie Yulu, he rubbed the handkerchief downwards, putting it against his incomplete body, and wiped it carefully. Tu Yao blushed all of a sudden and quickly diverted his gaze from the window. But even though he was already looking elsewhere, there was always a fair figure lingering in front of his eyes, his legs slightly parted, his head lowered to clean his private parts. He began to sense how stagnant his breathing was becoming, so he tilted his head upwards, wanting to take a look at the moon, only to realize that today was the first day of the month. Dejectedly, he turned back and peeked in again. Liao Jixiang had already put his clothes back on. He was now draped in a black gauze robe and sitting by the table. Holding a handful of melon seeds, he cracked them open one by one without eating them. All the cracked seeds were now cleanly placed on a square handkerchief, forming a small cone. Presently, he heard commotion in the courtyard. The sound of doors opening and closing, footsteps and whispers. Liao Jixiang stood up and looked eagerly at the door, and within a blink, it opened. Tu Yao frowned anxiously. The visitor was indeed Xie Yulu. "Why are you so late?" Liao Jixiang welcomed him with a hug, half shy and half annoyed, which was completely unlike his usual self. Xie Yulu grabbed him abruptly and wrapped his arms around him tightly, using so much strength that Tu Yao was getting worried that he might break Liao Jixiang. "Do you still remember?" Xie Yulu buried his head in the crook of Liao Jixiang's neck, "when I visited Zheng Xian to beg for mercy on behalf of Chu Feng. Back then, you told me that." After pausing for a while, Xie Yulu whispered with his lips trembling, "You said that if you were Chu Feng, you would rather die in West Yamen than bringing me harm." Liao Jixiang stayed listlessly in his arms without saying a word. I believe it now." Xie Yulu must have been shedding tears. "Jintang. Jintang," he sobbed, which made him unable to finish his sentence. Liao Jixiang sighed, wanting to comfort him, yet Xie Yulu suddenly looked up and pushed him back somewhat reproachfully. "Why aren't you crying?" He pushed Liao Jixiang to the table, blaming him for his very own weakness. "Why aren't you crying?" "Why?" He greedily took Liao Jixiang's lips into his mouth. Like a hungry, thirsty, ignorant child, he tasted and savored those lips over and over again. Liao Jixiang quietly gave in to his shameless actions. His eyes closed, even his eyelids were turning red from the passionate kisses. They are truly in that kind of relationship. Tu Yao glared at Xie Yulu ferociously, watching as Liao Jixiang fetched a melon seed from the table, stuffing it into Xie Yulu's mouth while they paused for a breath. Xie Yulu chewed it and swallowed it along with some saliva. Liao Jixiang fetched one more seed for him, which was cracked open by himself earlier. Although there were still tears hanging on Xie Yulu's eyelashes, he was now putting on a faint smile, and Liao Jixiang smiled with him, singing in a clumsy Nanjing dialect. "Oh, the melon seeds hidden in pointy shells, here I crack them to give to my lover. I sing to him, the taste of melon seeds is just this plain, so why don't you take care, to taste the sweetness on the tip of my tongue." Xie Yulu kissed him frantically. It stemmed from a madness that fermented from the immense volume of sorrow and desolation, as well as an extreme tenderness after his sorrows were washed away. Liao Jixiang panted heavily under his kiss. He could barely keep his eyes open as he ran his fingertips over Xie Yulu's lips. "I'm here, you have me." Xie Yulu let go of Liao Jixiang to look at him, still breathing heavily. While looking, his hands went to his chest. Thinking that he was about to take off his clothes, Liao Jixiang pursed his lips. But after digging around his clothes, Xie Yulu only fished out a small stone wrapped in paper. "I didn't go to the office today." He peeled off the paper wrapping, turned the stone over, and breathed moisture onto the carved surface stained with red stamp ink. Then, grabbing Liao Jixiang's hand, he pressed the tiny stone over the back of his hand, which was so white that it appeared a little bluish. "It's no jade. I hope you don't mind." Liao Jixiang stared at it blankly. After the stone was removed, an oval red seal remained on his skin. It mentioned nothing of golden sable or precious guest. Instead, it had 4 tiny characters engraved in the sigillary script. "R, love," he read, his voice trembling, "clearly defined. Our love, clearly defined." It was devoid of extravagance or glory, nor did it have anything to do with official ranks or military achievements. Liao Jixiang's heart was growing indescribably warm. The man in front of him understood him, not as the Liao Jixiang in other people's eyes but as the person he truly was, a naked, bare man without any distracting embellishments, a pitiable creature. He gritted his teeth using all his might, so hard that even Tu Yao could tell how hard he fought to hold back his tears from outside the window. At this time, Xia Yula was digging in his chest pocket again, and this time he had a small paper flower in his hand. It was cut out of a piece of red paper in the shape of a butterfly. I bought it from a street stall this morning. He pinned the butterfly near Liao Jixiang's sideburn and lifted his chin for a closer look. Feeling a little uneasy, Liao Jixiang wanted to look for the mirror to check if he was looking funny, but then he felt too self-conscious to do so. He ended up covering part of the butterfly with his hand. I'm not a girl or a child. Why buy these for me? Xia Yula giggled stupidly. His hand reached into his chest pocket again to fetch an identical paper hairpin. Clumsily, he inserted it into his own hair, then shook his head naughtily and displayed it to Liao Jixiang. Liao Jixiang couldn't stop laughing due to Xia Yula's antics, and when he laughed, his eyes curled up and his lips bent upwards, as invigorated as young buds in spring. Xia Yula's breathing quickened. He slowly reached under Liao Jixiang's clothes, who shivered but didn't refuse. Tu Yao could clearly see Xia Yula pull up the hem of Liao Jixiang's robe with his own eyes. I'm growing unsatisfied. Xia Yula sniffed his hair, two red paper butterflies fluttering as they came together. Of meeting you only at night. Liao Jixiang replied something that Tu Yao couldn't make out, but he saw Xia Yula's hands pinching that naked ass, leaving a red handprint with every knead. After some time of repeated pinching and kneading, the entire buttocks were flushing red. Holding him ever so tightly in his arms, Xia Yula led Liao Jixiang to the bedside, his fingertips rubbing against his wet lips. Shall we do it face to face today? Liao Jixiang remained silent. Then let's still start from bed. Xia Yula was initially teasing him with words, but he didn't expect Liao Jixiang to suddenly grab his finger, take it into his mouth and suck it deeply. Tu Yao was both shocked and awkwardly embarrassed on their behalf. Only until he heard Xia Yula say with a silly smile, "It's okay, it doesn't hurt," did he finally figure out that he had probably cut his finger and left a wound while carving the seal. Face to face, Liao Jixiang uttered all of a sudden, ever so timidly and lightly, like a drop of rain landing on a dragonfly's wing, or a flower newly blooming on the edge of a cliff, so stunning that it plucked at one's heartstrings. Holding firmly on his buttocks, Xia Yula lifted him and carried him onto the bed. Once they were in the bed, Tu Yao's view of them became half obstructed. All he could see were two slim legs parting wide to the edge of the bed, and Xia Yula taking off his garments impatiently in between. Before he was completely undressed, his head eagerly reached down, and became buried in. This is truly not for him to see. Panicking, Tu Yao swallowed dryly and closed his eyes, yet his ears could still pick up the humming and moaning of the powerful eunuch indulging in unbearable lust, amongst some obscene words reserved only for in between the sheets. They were genuinely having sex. Tu Yao should have gone back immediately to report to Zheng Xian that Liao Jixiang and Xia Yula were having an affair behind his back, behind the back of the entire city of Nanjing. That they were succumbing to lascivious fornication in this quiet corner every single night. You want to pee? Inside the window, Xia Yula asked as he went by the wall to bring a chamber pot. He couldn't make out the next words, nor did he open his eyes to see, but Tu Yao eventually heard Liao Jixiang say something extremely slowly yet undeniably urgently, "Come here." He opened his eyes in disbelief, and saw that Xia Yula had already taken off his pants. The thing attached to his lower body was so much bigger than any ordinary man. How could the cripple Liao Jixiang bear such a remarkable, intimidating cock? While he remained stunned, Xia Yula climbed onto the bed. He nudged himself against that obedient body underneath again and again, then came the moans that Liao Jixiang had tried so hard to suppress. He was taking it in. Tu Yao suddenly developed a hatred for Xia Yula, both for forcing himself in there, and for his hypocrisy and cunning. Back then at Zheng Xian's residence, Xia Yula had once discreetly inquired about the otter's penis. And just look at him now. How is he possibly a man in need of such a thing? At a change of perspective, Tu Yao suddenly realized, was it Liao Jixiang the one in need of it? Could it be that, they were already together at that time? Liao Jixiang's moans gradually subsided, the remaining muffled nasal sounds still lingered and circled around the bed. As Xie Yulu pushed him further into the bed, Tu Yao could only see a snow-white slender leg wrapping around Xie Yulu's waist, the toes curling upwards, the soft sole of the feet rubbing against Xie Yulu's sweaty skin. "How do you want it today?" Xie Yulu pestered him. Liao Jixiang actually answered, "Just the usual." And then Tu Yao heard the shameless creaking of the bed frame, eager and fast, accompanied by Xie Yulu's heavy panting and Liao Jixiang's increasingly louder screams. He really is not hiding from people. Tu Yao was embarrassed. The man guarding the courtyard must have heard their loud love-making every single night. Or perhaps, it wasn't that Liao Jixiang didn't want to be more discreet, but he truly couldn't hold it back. After all, Xie Yulu's hardness was indeed too massive. "Chun Shu, slow down." It looked like Liao Jixiang also felt how challenging Xie Yulu's size was, as he reached out to push Xie Yulu's hip bone slightly away from him. So, Xie Yulu slowed down, pumping in evenly with the rhythm. This time it was slower, but Liao Jixiang moaned even harder, and soon his thigh muscles were constricting and spasming violently. Where did he feel the pleasure? Tu Yao was both curious and confused. He even came up with some absurd speculations. So fast today. Xie Yulu seemed rather surprised as well. He carried Liao Jixiang by his waist and pulled him to the edge of the bed. Then, stretching his leg under the bed, Xie Yulu found the chamber pot and hooked it towards the both of them. In shyness and slight frustration, Liao Jixiang clasped his hands around Xie Yulu's arm, yet his lips were still trembling as he moaned ohs and ahs. He was obviously pushed to the peak. Before Tu Yao could react, Liao Jixiang suddenly gasped softly, his body steaming red, and he was still clinging to Xie Yulu's shoulder. Then came a shh sound as a thin stream trickled down from where the two bodies joined into one. It hit the chamber pot as well as their legs. Following Xie Yulu's movements, the stream dripped and flowed. Tu Yao's hands tightened around the window frame in shock. Liao Jixiang clearly could not control his bladder. "Are you all right?" Xie Yulu asked. He grabbed a handkerchief that was laid readily by the bed to wipe Liao Jixiang's legs. After wiping them clean, he carried him back into bed. By this time, Liao Jixiang was already dizzy from the climax. "How about," he said languidly, "I rub it for you with my hands?" Tu Yao was fully expecting that the pervert Xie Yulu would never agree, but Xie Yulu got up from Liao Jixiang without a moment of hesitation. After cleaning himself with a handkerchief, he knelt down next to him with his erection pointing high. And Liao Jixiang caught it between his hands. Even when Tu Yao strained his neck to peek, he could only see a pair of slender white hands, somewhat unskillfully stroking that intimidatingly large cock. Xie Yulu wrapped his hands around his own cock, held them tight and moved them back and forth. The more he pushed, the closer he became, as if he was going to push it into Liao Jixiang's face. "Yang Chun," he muttered almost inaudibly, very hesitantly, "the thing they did in the painting. Can you try?" He was referring to an erotic painting. As to which one, Tu Yao didn't know. All he could see was half of Liao Jixiang's face slowly revealed from behind the bed curtain. With his eyebrows lowered, looking down, he silently stared at the dark hardness in his hand. He stared and stared, then suddenly opened his mouth. For years, Tu Yao had been numb to so many things. Those people he had tortured, the seductive bodies on the brothel's bed, the shrill cries behind the iron bars. It had been so long, so very long, that he was once convinced that his feelings were all dead. And yet at this moment, when Liao Jixiang stretched his pinkish tongue to gently nibble at the head of Xie Yulu's cock, when he tried his best to take it in despite of how impossible it seemed, when he looked at Xie Yulu in the most intoxicated manner, Tu Yao covered his lower body for the first time in years. In fact, not only his lower body but his long-emptied chest suddenly sprung to life. End chapter. Dang. Chapter 44. When Xie Yulu arrived, Zhang Xian was bantering with several entertainers. On the table next to them was an unfinished round of Sheng Guantu with a bowl of soup resting on top of it. Tu Yao was sitting by the table, and when he noticed Xie Yulu, his gaze turned sharp and cutting as it swept over. Note: Sheng Guantu is a board game invented during the Tang dynasty which is a combination of snake and ladders and Monopoly. The objective is to attain the highest possible bureaucratic position while accumulating more prestige and funds than other players. Xie Yulu ignored him and sat down at a distance. Zhang Xian and the others were still teasing obscenely, probably exchanging some promiscuous tales. Xie Yulu kept a solemn expression on his face. He noticed how Tu Yao was looking at him, yet whenever he glanced back, Tu Yao would turn his face away. This annoyed him tremendously. Presently, Zhang Xian finally saw him. He warmly greeted, "Chun Chu is here." Xie Yulu remained silent. Zhang Xian was momentarily taken aback, then he raised his brows and reproached, "Have this one been too nice to you?" He only said addressed himself as this one when he was not in the mood. Yet Xie Yulu was not afraid. He immediately retorted, "Jin Tang was shouldering the blame for someone else. Do they have to torture him to death?" Zhang Xian slammed his palm on the table, almost causing the soup in the bowl to spill. No one asked him to volunteer as the scapegoat. He growled, "If we don't punish him hard this time, he'll think he can shit all over this one from now on." All the entertainers fell silent in fear. What Zhang Xian said indeed made sense. Jin Tang had probably been prepared to meet his fate when he went to Minister Chu's mansion, yet Xie Yulu still felt a piercing pain surging in his heart. Now that Jin Tang is dead, how could Liao Jixiang let it go? However, Zhang Xian only sneered as he casually pulled one of the entertainers into his embrace. "His man volunteered himself to me, so how can he blame me?" He mocked as he stared at Xie Yulu. "We're not that different. If it were him in my position, he probably won't show more mercy than me." He squinted his eyes as he explained earnestly. "Liao Jixiang is a man of reason." A chill ran down his neck suddenly. Xie Yulu fell silent. Zhang Xian had always been good at reminding him of that incident, of Liao Jixiang's ruthlessness. "Oh, by the way," Zhang Xian widened his eyes as he instructed Tu Yao sternly, "that Chu Feng should not have it easy." Tu Yao stood up immediately. "Understood, Du Gong. Since Jin Tang has taken the blame for him, we can't deal with him openly." Zhang Xian was pinching the rosy cheek of the entertainer in his arms, kissing it affectionately. "You, come up with some way and make it clean." Chu Feng had been hiding at his residence for days, which meant reaching him was not an easy task. However, Tu Yao had many tricks up his sleeve. He replied with leisure, "Certainly." Only then was Zhang Xian's mind finally at ease, and he wanted to have fun when he was relaxed again. Looking at Xie Yulu's stubborn, scholarly face and then at the bowl of thick soup in front of him, he wickedly winked to the entertainers, "Chun Chu, come, have this bowl of ginseng soup for your health." If it were any other soup, Xie Yulu might not have accepted. But hearing that it was a bowl of ginseng soup, he hesitated and walked over somewhat reluctantly. Without even saying thank you, he picked up the bowl and gulped it down. Tu Yao glanced at him from the corner of his eyes, his lips curling slightly upwards to form a smirk. It was hard to say whether it meant mockery or gloating. Then, he flicked his robe, stood up and bid farewell to Zhang Xian. Xie Yulu wanted to take his leave with him, but the moment he took a step, dizziness took over his body. Not just dizziness, he was also feeling somewhat lightheaded, as if he was limp to the bones, but his body was invigorated. Not too far from him, Zhang Xian and the entertainers couldn't contain themselves any longer and burst into laughter. Feeling as though his head was weighted down and his feet were in the cloud, Xiaoyula could barely hear them at all. Zhang Xian massaged his stomach as he laughed and instructed the servants, "Go. Take him to the back." And so, the young eunuchs helped Xiaoyula to a room at the back. Xiaoyula went along with them in a daze. Even when he was pushed onto the bed with his head landing first, his head remained clouded and couldn't fathom what was going on. After a short while, the door opened, and in came a delicate lad as a fresh blossom in spring. His name was Yu Jiazai, a catamite in Zhang Xian's mansion with a sweet coquettish look, who had always played the Dan role in an opera. /Note, Dan role referred to the female role in Chinese opera /. At the moment, he was climbing onto the bed while taking off his clothes. Still feeling dizzy and disoriented, Xiaoyula's sense of judgment had long departed from him. All he could feel was the burning needs rising from his lower body, erecting hard against the beddings. Like most entertainers newly entering the profession, Yu Jiazai was fond of scholars. With his chest exposed, he fervently proceeded to remove Xiaoyula's pants. The moment his pants were off, Yu Jiazai was audibly shocked. What was tucked in those pants were practically Yu Gong's golden mace or Erlang Shen's cracking whip. Even a single look at it was sufficient to take his breath away. Out of curiosity, he reached out to flick it, yet the moment he did so, Xiaoyula rolled over and pinned him underneath. "Ah!" the young boy exclaimed, although Xiaoyula had taken his lips into his own before Yu Jiazai managed to cry out loud. He kissed him thoroughly, inside and out. The taste of it was as indulging as drinking aged wine, and as affectionate as the sweetness of honey smeared on the lips. Yu Jiazai's chest was rubbed back and forth by two big hands, and even before anything else happened, the region between his legs was growing impatiently itchy from their body's friction. "Yang Chun!" With passion overflowing from his heart, Xiaoyula called out. The boy was stunned, and soon responded in an ingratiating manner, "I'm here, sweetheart." Xiaoyula frowned, but he continued to caress him in confusion. His hand ran over the immature body underneath him from top to bottom, and when they arrived between those legs, he suddenly shuddered and stopped. "No, this isn't right." Yu Jiazai, already riding the waves of pleasure, tugged at Xiaoyula eagerly. His round buttock stubbornly wriggled its way into his arms. "There's nothing wrong here. Doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman." Yet Xiaoyula shoved him aside all of a sudden. He wrapped himself haphazardly in his garments and stumbled off the bed, dashing out of the mansion with his unsteady gait. As Zhang Xian had already given his bowl of soup to Xiaoyula, he told the kitchen to prepare another bowl for himself. While waiting, he saw the stubborn, silly Tanhua stumbled out from the back, his garments in complete disarray. Like a gust of wind sweeping through the hall, Xiaoyula was gone. Zhang Xian stared blankly at the fleeting figure for a while, then hesitated as he asked those around, "Wasn't that too damn fast?" The entertainers joked and teased, "Look at him, he's a spear made of wax. Might be even softer than ours down there." Their remark was intended to please Zhang Xian, and indeed he was pleased. Rubbing his hands together, Zhang Xian announced, "I should pay them a visit. We don't want your brother's ass to end up in a mess." As he spoke, he left for the chamber in the back. The door was open and Yu Jiazai was idly sitting on the bed and putting on his clothes. He walked into the chamber, picked up the teacup on the table, and took a sip. "Is your hole blooming?" Yu Jiazai, still gorgeous like a peony flower, shot him a coquettish glance. "I wish it's all blooming," he said as he stepped off the bed barefoot. "We didn't do anything." Zhang Xian couldn't believe it. That bowl of soup should keep him excited for 3 shishan. Then at a turn of thought, he shook his head. Well, one's brain turns dull when he reads too much, and that's how his thing down there becomes underdeveloped. "Oh, but he's got a trophy." Yu Jiazai immediately retorted, gesturing wildly with his delicate little hands. "It's this big." Zhang Xian stared at the shocking size, half believing and half doubting. The chamber fell into an awkward silence. Tidying up his hair in front of the mirror, Yu Jiazai continued, he has a lover you know, and he kept calling her name while I was in his arms. And because of the incident with the size, Zheng Xian found himself leaning against a cabinet in the chamber with a cup of tea in his hand, as defeated as a withered eggplant covered in frost. Yet Yu Jiazai was still going on, sounds like they're so very close, calling her Yang Chun so affectionately. Crack. It was the sound of the porcelain cup shattering on the floor. Yu Jiazai turned and saw the fresh shards on the ground and complained casually, can't a grown man like you just hold the cup? As his gaze shifted up from the cracked pieces to Zheng Xian's face, he immediately stopped talking. Guards! At the peak of fury, Zheng Xian shouted with his face turning purplish, bring Tu Yao back to me. ******. The next evening, Tu Yao was waiting in the hall with a heavy heart. He was in fact summoned back to the mansion last night by Zheng Xian, who demanded him to kneel the moment he arrived, kicked his shoulders and questioned, I thought you had been keeping an eye on Xie Yulu? Speak. What sort of shameless things has he done? Naturally, Tu Yao had no courage to bring up Xie Yulu's affair with Liao Jixiang. If he admitted the affair, it would suggest that he had been aware all along. Last time, Du Gong instructed me not to follow him, so I told my men to stop. He persevered in his effort to not confess. All I found out was that he visited the weaving and sewing bureau in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night. Zheng Xian abruptly slammed his hand on the table, his fists trembling with anger, apparently steaming with rage. He knew Liao Jixiang well, a man who would never succumb to anything that absurd. Regardless of the perspectives he could think of, the only convincing possibility here was that Xie Yulu approached him with hidden motives. Go, use my visitation card and invite Liao Jixiang here. And so, Tu Yao was sent to the weaving and sewing bureau, although he was well aware that Liao Jixiang couldn't possibly be there in the middle of the night. After delivering the letter and leaving a message, he returned to the mansion and waited with Zheng Xian. Perhaps it was due to the effects of that bowl of soup that they waited from sunrise to sunset, but still, Liao Jixiang never showed up. As he stole glances at Zheng Xian sitting at the center of the hall, Tu Yao realized that he was unable to fathom Zheng Xian's thoughts. Suppose Zheng Xian wanted to bring Liao Jixiang down, this was a perfect opportunity to strike, and to do so, he should have been summoning Xie Yulu. When the crescent moon climbed to the tall branches, Liao Jixiang finally paid them a visit. Tu Yao saw him from afar. He was clad in a robe of shiny crimson soft silk, with embroideries of quail patterns at the knee level. His left foot was still limping, but now, he seemed to have transformed into a distorted, frail beauty. Zheng Xian took note of his arrival as well, so he said to Tu Yao, what happens next doesn't concern you. You're dismissed. Tu Yao took the order and left. When he reached the end of the stairs, Liao Jixiang happened to be ascending. Out of an unspeakable intrinsic urge, he earnestly offered his arm and lowered his head in respect. He never expected Liao Jixiang to actually use his support, but in that fleeting moment of exchange, his elbow felt heavier all of a sudden. While it was nothing but a brief instant of warmth, what he sensed truly belonged to Liao Jixiang. He turned around somewhat bemused, but Liao Jixiang had already gone up, leaving him only a slender silhouette surrounded by attendants. Liao Jixiang and Zheng Xian took their seats side by side, and in between them was a tiny tea table with 2 teacups. Liao Jixiang picked up one of them and sipped from it slowly. On the other hand, Zheng Xian's mind was filled with words that he had been pondering upon all day and night. And now that Liao Jixiang was sitting right next to him, he didn't know how to begin. I'm here. Liao Jixiang placed the cup back on the table, subtly shifting his waist and hips in the chair, as if he was rather uncomfortable in it, for Jintang. Zheng Xian shifted his face away in irritation. What's left to say? For this matter, I won't blame you. Liao Jixiang didn't look at him as well, he was staring straight ahead. After all, they had never exchanged a single word face to face after more than 10 years living outside the palace. But the man I rested my hand on just now, he has to die. He was referring to Tu Yao, and Zhang Xian didn't really pity the loss, but he was too reluctant to let Liao Jixiang easily achieve this goal. Jin Tang died for his own choices. Surely Tu Yao didn't force him to do it. Liao Jixiang rested his hand on the edge of the table. It was slender and half hidden in his sleeve. Zhang Xian couldn't help but look at it discreetly. Back in the palace, that hand was destined for turning pages and holding calligraphy brushes. Yet when he went to Gansu, the same hand had wielded swords and fought in battles. In all those bitter years, how did he survive? Erwa, Liao Jixiang suddenly called out, Jin Tang was my flesh and blood, while Tu Yao is merely a dog of yours. You deal with it by yourself, I won't intervene. Erwa, a name that Zhang Xian had not heard in years. Ever since the emperor granted him his new name, he had spent his years living up to the character Xian, extravagant yet fictitious. The sound of his old name almost brought hot tears to his eyes in a split second. Ha, he forced a laugh. You think if you ask me to sever my own arm, and I'll just do it? He wanted Liao Jixiang to respond, but Liao Jixiang remained silent. The hall was suddenly so silent that Zhang Xian almost wanted to ingratiatingly agree to his demands. At that moment, Liao Jixiang stood up and Zhang Xian instinctively grabbed his hand, almost blurting out, "Don't go." Very steadily and patiently, Liao Jixiang withdrew his hand from Zhang Xian's grasp with grace. "Xia Yulu has paid you private visits, hasn't he?" In seething resentment, Zhang Xian accused as he glared at him empty-handed. Liao Jixiang's body visibly stiffened for a moment, then he glanced back at him, feigning confusion. It was the very first time for them to look each other in the eye in years. Every hair of Zhang Xian's body was standing on end. "There's no need to deny it. I know, he must have told you that he will secretly help you to bring me down. Little do you know what kind of filthy mind he is harboring." Liao Jixiang avoided his gaze, wanting to turn away and leave, but Zhang Xian scrambled up and blocked his way. "What I said is absolutely true. Yesterday, he even came here to play with the entertainers." The moment he heard the words "play with the entertainers," Liao Jixiang fixed his dagger-like gaze on him, his lips trembling so violently that Zhang Xian dared not say any more. He understood that look in an instant, for it apparently contained bitterness of betrayal, and the frustration of a lover's infidelity. Ah! Zhang Xian was dumbfounded. Seizing the opportunity of Zhang Xian's bewilderment, Liao Jixiang shoved him aside and dashed out the door. Sitting in his sedan chair, Liao Jixiang covered his wet eyes with his sleeves. The time was midnight. Xia Yulu should be waiting for him in the courtyard of Santiago Lane. As the sedan chair passed by the Qinhua River, Liao Jixiang could hear the prostitute singing softly, "For a secret affair is like owning a bronze mirror. Once I polished you shine, I fear for you to reflect someone else." End chapter. Dadang. Chapter 45. Liao Jixiang first returned to the weaving and sewing bureau, and from there, he left for Santiago Lane. He carefully wiped his face when he entered the courtyard before pushing the door to the chamber. He found Xia Yulu sitting at the table, looking rather apprehensive. The moment he saw Liao Jixiang, he immediately stood up. "Are you all right?" he asked, reaching out to support Liao Jixiang's lower back. Liao Jixiang avoided his gaze. He didn't want to, yet this urge was too hard to control. "How's your behind?" Xia Yulu was very close when he whispered the question. This form of caring concern, this degree of loving gentleness. Was it something he had given to others as well? Only then did Liao Jixiang realize how inevitable and commonplace jealousy was for any human being. "You don't look well." Xia Yulu helped him onto a chair and laid a cushion underneath him. "Is something bothering you?" Liao Jixiang only looked at him in silence. His concern seemed all too deliberate, which was just like how they sang in an opera. When a man developed a taste for secret lovers, he would act exceptionally affectionate towards his actual wife. You may become annoyed, but Xiaoyulo shifted around in an uneasy manner, stumbling with his words, I still have to confess. Plop. He knelt down all of a sudden and hugged Liao Jixiang's knees in his arms. I did something foolish. Something foolish. Liao Jixiang sensed fear rising in his heart, dreadful for a confession about him fooling around with entertainers. To act jealous and compete with others for one man was truly not his forte. He clenched his hands in his sleeves, fingers curling hard and his lips pressed tightly together. I was tempted by Zhang Xian's bowl of ginseng soup. Xiaoyulo lowered his head, timid and embarrassed. I only realized after drinking it, that it was no ginseng soup. It was, he looked up, staring at Liao Jixiang with a pained expression, it was an aphrodisiac. Liao Jixiang widened his eyes. No wonder he was so, last night. As the thought came to his mind, he blushed. Xiaoyulo was still kneeling. Perhaps the confession had lightened the burden of his heart. He grabbed Liao Jixiang's sleeve and reached into it, fumbling inside to play with those fingers sticky with perspiration. Zhang Xian be damned. Liao Jixiang stared at him, taken aback. The previous annoyance that preoccupied him was suddenly gone. He moved his fingers slightly, allowing them to entwine with Xiaoyulo's. That's probably an entertainer, Xiaoyulo lamented, not quite an apology but more like a complaint. Regardless, Zhang Xian's place has so many indecent boys, all acting like seductive girls. By that time, Liao Jixiang felt that he couldn't blame Xiaoyulo anymore. As long as Xiaoyulo had him in his heart, he wouldn't blame him for anything. I was so confused, Xiaoyulo regretted bitterly, as if he were the one to have been taken advantage of. And I thought he was you, but when he took off his clothes and I touched, he pouted like a child, he wasn't you. Liao Jixiang actually wanted to laugh, yet he managed to hold it in. He didn't expect Xiaoyulo to keep on talking, so, with my hands covering my groin, I rushed back to look for you. But it taken such a long time for it to stay so hard that it refused to soften until the early morning. He stammered out an apology, I am sorry for making you go through it all. Unable to hold back his laughter anymore, Liao Jixiang relied on anger to cover his smile. Were you lacking food or garments that you just have to covet Zhang Xian's distasteful bowl of soup? Sensing his fury, Xiaoyulo was so frightened that his face turned pale. He tightly grasped Liao Jixiang's hands, explaining, he told me it was ginseng soup. And Xiaoyulo wasn't really that stupid either. Changing the subject, he retorted, as the saying goes, 1 drop of seed is worth 10 drops of blood. He looked at Liao Jixiang with a hint of blame, you tell me, all that essence of mine ended up in your belly. Shouldn't you consider making it up for me? Liao Jixiang had no response to that. Glaring at Xiaoyulo in tender yet mixed feelings, he continued, you really didn't do it? Xiaoyulo felt wronged. If I did, he swore, then it won't be you whose behind would be hurting. His words were too inappropriate for his liking. Liao Jixiang immediately poked Xiaoyulo's forehead with his finger. You were the one who had ambiguous encounters with others, yet you dare to argue. Hugging his waist, Xiaoyulo dared not speak loudly, so he murmured, then what about you and Zhang Fang, or Gong Nian? He went on buzzing like a mosquito, exchanging letters and sharing drinks. Oh dear, how did I survive it all then? Liao Jixiang wrapped his arms around his head, smiling. They're not like you, whose mind is always filled with that kind of matter. Then I too shall find a few confidants who don't think about that kind of matter, so that I can show them to you, and see if you'll make a scene. Xiaoyulo retorted. Liao Jixiang didn't respond immediately. After a moment of silence, he chanted softly, when you have a woman and a son by your side, how could you know that I'm waiting by my door, my heart hanging high? A woman and a son represented very, and waiting by my door, my heart hanging high implied upset. Xie Yulu immediately stood up and took Liao Jixiang into his embrace. I'm sorry. It's my fault. Yang Chun, from now on, I'll only stay by your side, in this life, in the next life, in every life we're going to have. Liao Jixiang allowed himself to lean against Xie Yulu's chest, although his mind wandered to Mei Azha's words, he's taking advantage of you, yet you allowed him to treat you like an entertainer, like a toy boy, and of course everything about him would look nice when he's fooling you around. But when he's had his fill of you, he'll toss you aside once and for all. As if in a hurry, he closed his eyes, burying his face in Xie Yulu's embrace, and drew in a deep breath of his scent. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Two Anan eunuchs sat down under the midday sun and basked lazily. When they were on the verge of sleep, one of them suddenly said, "So, Yashiha just left, just like that?" The other squinted his eyes in drowsiness, replying, "It said that he left at night, and claimed Zhang Chai's long sword as his." Aren't they very close? Just ask for it, why claim it? Some say that, they have done that together. How terrible of him. No wonder the lad hasn't left his room for days. Not to mention that Jintang died so miserably. Say, should we be nicer to those JLI people for a couple of days? Sure thing. Oh, and someone told me, that the whore of Brother Ruan's, he lowered his voice, trying to stay discreet, seems to be pregnant. You mean that Yangzhou girl? And she got it from being forced on. As they talked, Ruan Dian stepped over the threshold and approached them. The two immediately fell silent, stood up and bowed. What are you doing, huh? Ruan Dian yelled at them. He seemed drunk, for his cheeks were flushed red. Come here. The two eunuchs shifted over timidly. Ruan Dian glared at them ferociously, then, fishing out two tiny pieces of silver from his waist pocket and patting those on their hands, he exclaimed passionately, I'm going to be a father. The two eunuchs exchanged glances. Brother. Ruan Dian stopped them with his gaze. For her profession, it's never easy to get pregnant. You too, when you're free, chant more sutras for me regularly. I've spent too long handling longsword and being violent that the aura of death about me is too strong. Hearing him say so, the two chuckled. That's great, brother. Just think about it, when you spared her life back then, you saved not just one life but two. The Buddha will remember the good deed. Still intoxicated from alcohol, Ruan Dian asked, do you have a statue of the Bodhisattva? The two shook their heads, so Ruan Dian patted their shoulders. Wait here, I'll go get it. He turned around, muttering, when Yashiha left, surely he didn't carry the Bodhisattva with him. The two eunuchs remained standing, holding the silver pieces, watching as Ruan Dian staggered forward, body swaying while humming a popular tune. Beyond the beaded curtain, petals fell and pollen danced. Behind the beaded curtain, the door stayed closed and still. I looked into the mirror in shyness, and saw my delicate face, willowy brows. He staggered to Yashiha's door and pushed. When the door remained still, he rammed it with his shoulder. The two eunuchs watched from a distance and wanted to help, but then, the door opened. Ruan Dian lifted his foot and stepped over the threshold. I calculated your date of return on my fingertips, and blamed you for leaving me here, indebted to missing you and your love. He headed in, and looked up, indebted to your annoying love. All they heard next was a sudden scream. As if their souls were scared away from their body, the two eunuchs rushed to Yashiha's room. Upon entering, they saw Ruan Dian sitting on the ground, with a figure hanging from the ceiling joist. The figure was dressed in bright red cloud brocade. It was Zhang Chai. The sound of water splashing could be heard in the chamber. It came from two betta fish in the earthen jar, biting each other and splashing water with their fins. As the shock passed, Ruan Dian quickly scrambled up from the ground and hugged Zhang Chai's legs, supporting them with his own chest. Why are you fools standing there? He yelled like a madman. Bring the table. Save him. The two immediately pushed the table over and stepped onto it. Then, they drew their long swords to cut the rope loose, but deep down they all knew it was too late, the lad was already stiff. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Dressed in white, Liao Jixiang sat in a large chair, his Anan subordinates guarding his left and right. In front of him was a coarse linen sack, which revealed a young face when untied. The face had rosy lips and a pair of coquettish eyes, although they were now trembling in fear. Alio loosened the sack, dragged him out, and pinned him to the ground, tugging his hair backwards for Liao Jixiang to see. You are Yu Jiazai? Liao Jixiang asked ominously. Yes, it's me. Yu Jiazai trembled as he curled up on the ground, shivering. He could tell that he was arrested by eunuchs, yet he didn't know which faction they belonged to. This one often visit Master Zheng Xian's residence. Liao Jixiang didn't let him finish. I heard you're good at playing dice games. He glanced at Ruan Dian. They told me you're adept with your fingers, and intimate with your eyes. How charming. This one dare not. Yu Jiazai watched as Ruan Dian approached him with a pair of pliers and a clamp board. He knew he was going to suffer, so he wriggled and struggled, his legs kicking futilely in the air. How did this one offend the respected master? This one's innocent. Yet Liao Jixiang only looked at him coldly, watching tears streaming down his face. His small hand was firmly held between the clamp boards by Ruan Dian, his 10 slender fingers were undeniably gorgeous and indisputably charming. Liao Jixiang suddenly developed a form of hatred towards himself. Jin Tang had died and so did Zhang Chai, and instead of seeking vengeance for them, here he was, torturing an innocent entertainer. Just as Ruan Dian was about to use the pliers, Liao Jixiang stopped him. Give it to Aliu, he said, you may go. Ruan Dian was about to become a father, he didn't want him to be involved in bloodshed. And so, Aliu took over the pliers. His feelings were numb when he grabbed one of those small hands. It was soft and somewhat resembled Guozai's woes. When Yu Jiazai guessed what he was about to do, he pleaded, curling his fingers into a fist and sobbed. With some easy effort, Aliu picked out one of the fingers. He placed the pliers over its pretty nail, and tugged lightly. Ah! It was a shrill scream, but no one present so much as raised an eyebrow. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Zheng Xian was watching quail fights in the courtyard with Tu Yao standing beside him. Put aside the matter of Chu Feng for now. Tu Yao didn't ask why, and after a while, Zheng Xian spoke again, deal with Xia Yula first. Why? Tu Yao asked despite being fully aware of the answer. I find him annoying. Zheng Xian replied in an arrogant manner. Is that acceptable? The first thought that came to Tu Yao's mind was that if Xia Yula died, Liao Jixiang would be devastated. No, he worked up the courage to refuse. I won't do it. Zheng Xian stared at him, as if he had come to know this man for the very first time. As Tu Yao looked back at him, he felt utterly uneasy. After all, we are colleagues. To do such a thing that brings sorrow to his loved ones and joy to his enemies. Liao Jixiang is demanding your life from me. Zheng Xian interrupted him. Tu Yao's eyes widened abruptly, his throat felt swollen as he swallowed hard. With Jin Tang dead, we need to compensate in some way. If not Xia Yulu, then it's you. Yet Tu Yao was aware of everything. If he killed Xia Yulu, Liao Jixiang would definitely obliterate him. And since Zheng Xian thought that he had no idea of their relationship, he was effectively trying to shove him towards an ignorant death. I'm indeed nothing but a lowly dog of Zheng Xian after all. He thought to himself. End chapter.